Hello everyone. Welcome to my teaching learning session. We continue with the last unit of BPCC-131 as being the foundation of psychology. This is the last unit that will talk about the core of psychology today, which is intelligence finishing to us. Let's understand a little bit in terms of what is the definition of intelligence before we go and jump into all the theories again. Intelligence is defined as the ability to think well, judge well, and understand well. Also, to keep that in mind, we need to know that intelligence will always be taken as a aggregate global capacity. Why do we say a global capacity? Because we're talking about intelligence to be taking care of all the things that you have, which talks about speaking well, writing well, doing well, understanding the world well, and also at the same time being able to rationally using those experiences and applying to your life effectively. Now, coming to the theories, we did the last few theories that we did were the theories of intelligence, which were information processing. And now are the theories that we are going to consider irrespective of psychometric or information processing. These are theories, they were apart the approaches, which was given by Raymond Cattell. Raymond Cattell's theory of intelligence was given in 1963. He came with the thought that intelligence can be, shaped up in different forms. Like the term suggests, it says that there's something called a fluid intelligence and there's something called a crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is what? Imagine fluid is something what? Which is keep flowing, does not have a shape. It is something which is free flowing also. So fluid intelligence has the capacity to solve new problem. There is no knowledge from any knowledge, any past experiences. Rather, the person innovates something new. So I don't know if we can make the same thing utilize, but we can say that fluid intelligence is also something which is associated to creatively finding solutions to problems. As it does not have a shape, as it does not have a form, we don't have any past experiences. We solve things here and now, devise things here and now. So when we speak about crystallized intelligence, what is crystallized? An already used form, something which already has a form, something which is already fixed. This is the ability to use your skills, your knowledge, your past experiences that you've had. So crystallize is what? Something which is solidified from a long time. Let's take a simple example. We have an ice cube. When the water that you find in a jar, you drink it, right? It does not come in any form. It could have been in a jar, it could have been in a bottle, it could have been in a flask, or probably in a glass. But when we talk about a cube, the cube has been transferred into a mold and solidified. That means it has some memory, it has some past knowledge, it also has something which has been solidified into it. So it involves intellectual learning that one has accumulated from the past lifespan. This intelligence is, usually expressed in the form of something which was already there in our mind is general knowledge, learning of the past. I'm sure a child who's gone to a first class will not forget his or her nursery rhymes, will not forget what is ABC, will not forget the thought process of Hindi also. Similarly, basic maths. Remember, when we start with basic maths, we start them to make them understand the same in terms of all the operation, addition, subtraction, multiplication. You coming to class 4th or 3rd, and all the sectors of operation gets glorified, they get more complicated, but you do not forget the past information because it is knowledge, it is general knowledge, it can be formulas, thoughts, theories that you have learned before. So that can be a good example is, when we sit for any paper, any examination, the knowledge that you retrieve out is crystallized intelligence. The beautifully that you write in the paper, like creatively putting new ways, putting a graphical, diagrammatic chart into it, that's something which is fluid intelligence. So this finishes and suggests the two kinds of Cattell's theories, identification of intelligence, that intelligence can be of two kinds. It's not that people are of these type of intelligence. Intelligence itself is of two kinds, which is fluid intelligence and something which is crystallized intelligence. Then, as mentioned in the image, we can see that for understanding. Things abstractly, solve scope problems, creativity is fluid intelligence, something which increases your focus, your knowledge, your coming from your experiences is something which is crystallized intelligence. Now, past theory is one of the information processing theory. It is strictly stated, as we did in the last unit, it is strictly an information processing approach. Saying that it's strictly information processing, it is elongated, it's qualitative in nature. It makes sure that you are able to explain how an intelligent person will act and perform in a day-to-day living. And how do they might pick up a task of managing a child, deciding for their papers, deciding for their education stream, deciding what kind of job is to be done. So how an intelligent person acts and thinks is something which was highly associated to past theory, and it's one of the best example of information processing theory that we did that day, that we did in the last session. Now, let's take an understanding that who has been having past theory model, and it's given by whom? It's given by three people: Das, Nigleri, and Kirby. It's given in 1994. I feel this is not one of those theories that goes back like 3 to 4 decades back. It's been just around the corner. It's been very close to 2000. So it's very functional as a theory that we need to understand. It's very applicatory, and very applied. So let's understand what do they give as past model. So past include as P is planning, A is attention arousal, S is systematic and successive. So let's understand what is happening. Kirby, Das, and Nigleri stated that whenever an intelligent person is encountered with a situation, they don't start with P. They start with an A, which is you tend to get aroused and attend to a situation. Once you do that, how will you start functioning ahead? You would want to process the information. So something that you've received through attending and arousing, you would want to process it also, which is simultaneously and successively processing that information. After that, you process that information, you want to plan it. Plan, usually people state that it is suggestive of being the first paradigm or the first step, but no. Das, Kirby, and Nigleri felt that planning should be the last, and the reason was planning was one of the most important part where the individual decides that whatever problem that they've encountered and the solution that they're given, is it workable or not? So is A is equal to B or not? And if it's not, then they plan and come out with plan C. And if C doesn't work, then they plan and come out with D. So let's understand what is A. Das, Kirby, and Nigleri stated that people require a minimal, adequate amount of arousal to attend to a situation. So once you attend to the situation, what will you do? You will simultaneously process that situation, or you will successively process that situation. So let's understand an intelligent person will get aroused, attend, then process, and then plan. That's how the information goes on. Let's understand. Planning is very goal directed. Why? Because it's actually sending out feedback, monitoring if your solutions have come out, or we need to change the kind of processing. After you get aroused adequately, and you tend to, after arousal, you tend to attend to the situation and you process information. Remember, how is processing happening? Simultaneous processing and successive. Simultaneous is which helps in perceiving you a stimuli as a whole. So you tend to integrate multiple stimuli together into a group and then understand the problem or then understand the situation. If that doesn't work, let's take an example. A child is trying to learn a theory on the basis of, let's take an example on the basis of understanding all the theories together and differentiating them, taking that if information processing theory means this, these are all the theories, and they simultaneously learn all. So it's like collecting, perceiving the stimuli as a whole by perceiving all the other stimuli and integrating it. Whereas when we talk about something which is successive, successive is coming in a sequence order. Coming in a, let's take an example, serially. Best way, coming in serial order, which is alphabet comes in serial order, A, B, C, D, E, F, that's coming in a serial order. Your tables come in a serial order, which is of 2. And successive processing tends to be very good for children who rote learn information, are very good with learning in a sequence. So successive processing tends to benefit those kinds. Always remember, past model helps in understanding the various cognitive processes of reasoning, imagery, language, and memory. So how an intelligent person thinks is very well justified with imagery, language, memory, and reasoning, etc. So that completes with past model, and this is how it functions. See, let's take an example. It's a beautiful, beautiful model that we all should, get into and understand. It says what is the input. Let's take an example. There's this input that comes in, and you tend to get aroused. Once you get aroused, you ideally memorize it, conceptualize it, or just perceive it, and you attend to it. Once you perceive it properly or attend to it properly, conceptualize it, make meaning out of it, further happens the processing. So processing can be successive also and silent. It's one of the most functional unit. Why? Because successive talks about how you're understanding that thing. Are you integrating it, or you serially rote learning it? Wow, that's where the core learning, that's where the concepts are being learned and understood and applied. Once this is done, the last is the feedback loop. See, it's a knowledge-based concept. So once you attend to something or get aroused and attend to something, your attended processed information was found to be correctly applied in that situation and is giving you and reaping you great result. See, if it does not reap you great result, then then it is a possibility that people will use another plan. So if, let's take an example, you wanted to study something through successive processing, you were planning to integrate everything together and you've done a successive processing, but there's no result, you did not get great marks, you just realize you need to write it in a pattern, you need to write it in in an order, and probably simultaneous will not fetch you any good. So that is where serial order comes into play. So that is something that we talk about in terms of serial order. That completes with the past model that we tend to understand. Now, let's come to another theory of technological intelligence. This is a theory that tells us how technology tends to tell us that intelligence might differ as per its upliftment and as per its growth. So, as per the technological intelligence, it was stated that the theory stated that the culture has a great influence on intelligence. This is something we've done this even before. Vygotsky stated that culture is a prime aspect when we speak about intelligence, which is why Vygotsky stated there's a huge role of the socio-cultural factors providing a child to live, to grow, and to adapt and understand the world. And Vygotsky also forwarded the idea that your culture promotes intellectual development. That means the better the intellectual development will grow as per your cultural development. So if your culture is developed, your child will equally be developed. Remember, if a child is being developed in a very regressive culture which does not talk about education, does not find the importance of education, does not give them timely education, remember, there the children are going to be unemployed, do not fetch the do not fetch the understanding of what is the core of education, is it important. So such culture, regressive culture, will promote the similar kind of development. Also, the high order mental functions are culturally determined, which is very true. This is a very beautiful thought which was given when technological intelligence was coming into play. People stated that our the time that our primary functions, the functions that are common to all, the functions which are at the age of 1, 2, and 3, the time that you are at school, the part that you do not enter school, you do not have any social interaction, you do not have any interaction with a culturally appropriate or independent individual, which are your teachers, which are your elder friends, etc. Before that, all of us has universal learning. How? For anything, crying, yawning, language, babbling, everything remains the same. Discomfort by every child is shown by crying, so it's common. So these are universal in nature, and they stated as we grow ahead for higher order functions, these higher order functions are culturally determined. How you learn to greet, what you learn to greet, for what, everything is culturally determined. Such intelligence reflects, and also it was stated at the same time that technology also impacts intelligence, but technology favors what? Technology favors abstraction, quickness, minimal moves, high speed, a lot of achievement, performance, and they're very achievement oriented. Talk to them. Technologically smart countries that we have today are more responsible for giving higher performance in lesser time, less speed, minimal moves, high performance. So analysis is good, observation again is very weak. So this is something that is going to be technological intelligence. Let's compare it with a non-technological country. Remember, a non-technological country is going to be a country that focuses not on cultural oriented, on achievement oriented, but culture orientation. It will talk about not speed but interaction, social dependency, harmony. These are the terms that we should understand. I would obviously want to say that we are one of the non-technologically advanced, non-technological country, because we look forward for social orientation. We look forward to collectivism, working together. And yes, the other Western countries look forward for individualism, looks forward to achievement orientation, etc. So you can go through the theory of technological intelligence. Moving ahead, apart the technologically bright and low technological, we have some intelligence which was very Indian inclined, which was inclined to India's perspective, which was called the integral intelligence. The Indian perspective, it is called the integral intelligence, that is reflected. As the name suggests, integral means integrating, it means holistic, it means whole. So this perspective incorporates both cognitive and non-cognitive processes. So remember, we are not going to be only socially inclined, will equally be not only socially but equally be high in speed, high in performance. We would want people to be there, we would want people for interaction, we would want being aligned to the society, but at the same time we would be achievement oriented, we would be having that individual streak for our growth and our development. So the main competency of integral intelligence is cognitive, emotional, social, and entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurial competence has been a very new competence because of startup companies, entrepreneurs coming to the country, and integral intelligence has incorporated that competence too. When speaking of integral intelligence, unlike the intelligence is dependent and influenced by what? It's influenced by genetic factors and also environmental factors. We've already had a nature nurture debate that we had discussed in this. So, similarly, when we have the two influencing us on something which is integral intelligence, we need to know uh, that similarly your integral intelligence, like any other intelligence, will be influenced by heredity and environment, which is nature and nurture. So it would be something, some competence are going to be high because children have parents who have the higher kind of intelligence in terms of integral. And then it could be nurture also, which is environmental factors. Some people have great competence because they are getting such an environment. They get an environment which is emotionally competing, socially comforting, also giving, understanding, etc. So this is again to tell us that even integral as an intelligence is being influenced by heredity and environment. According to Sri Aurobindo, the ultimate aim of intelligence is a direct cognizance without any mediation of senses. Hence, without the distortion brought by ego. This was given by Barrel and Das in 2004. Kindly go through the slide. This is the competence that we should go. Kindly have a look and then we discuss. Speaking of the capacities and competence, we have cognitive capacity and cognitive competence, which is, understanding, being able to discriminate, problem solving, effective communication, and sensitivity to context. Sensitivity to context is being able to speak, understand, behave as per situations. Then we have social competence is respect for elders, social order, looking forward to the needy, also making sure recognizing other people's perspective. You cannot be always me, and me. You need to look forward to other people, understand other people. Also, then we have something which is emotional competence. Emotional competence is self-regulation and monitoring. Emotional competence, you should, instantly think about what is there in emotional intelligence. It's going to be quite similar. Regulation and monitoring is coming from something which is emotional competence, and being polite, then being honest, good conduct, and self-evaluation. A self-feedback is a prime situation when we talk about emotional competence. Then we have entrepreneurial need to be committed, persevere, hard work, vigilant, should be goal directed also. So this suggests with the kind of competence that we have in in the integral intelligences. Let's move ahead. Now, after understanding that intelligence have two kind of approaches, which is the psychometric approach, and also at the same time we have something which is information processing, and we have different theories under it. We understand that intelligence is something that can be depending on culture. It can also be influenced by technology. It can also be influenced by the kind of people we have in our environment. It is also a kind of intelligence in terms of integral. It is influenced by the kind of culture that we are coming from. So that's called the different kinds of intelligences that we've studied as per people, as per society, also as per technology. Now let's understand, can intelligence be assessed? Yes, it can be. Remember, we do assess intelligence quantitatively. It gives you a number. It gives you a very accurate result of, what you want to do, where do you understand, where do you see yourself, and what kind of ability, how much, where in the population are you in the gifted side of the population or in the average side or below that, or you need much more effort, or there is an alarming situation that we need to take care of. So the attempt of understanding intelligence and its assessments was started with Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. These were the first people who came up with understanding intelligence, who came up with measuring intelligence, who stated that intelligence can be measured, intelligence can be taken care of. So this is something that we understand from the two, which is Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. 1905, there was the first intelligent test that was made, and this was labeled as Binet-Simon intelligence test around in 1905. And then in 1908, they coined a concept called a mental age. They came up with this very beautiful thought that there's something called a mental age, which people were not considering when they were taking out IQ, when they were taking out your intelligence, when they were doing their intelligence test and finding people's intelligence. They came out with a very simple formula for people. So the kind of formula was MA upon CA. So MA was the intellectual ability as per comparative to your age. So your mental capacity as per age. So mental age upon chronological age into 100 was the formula of IQ. According to Binet, if a child has a mental age which is higher than his chronological age, the child will consider to be bright, he or she. Let's take a very simple example. A 10-year-old, an 8-year-old child has a 10-year-old mental capacity. So see, isn't it? It's going to be more than something which is 100%, right? Now a 10-year-old having a 10-year-old capacity, 10 will get minus by 10, 100%, which is an average child. Now a child is 120, 125. Remember, they are going ahead the average, which is the meet expectation, which is the 50 with the bell curve. Also, children who fall below, which is, let's take an example, who has a 7 mental age upon 7, it's going to be 70%. That means they are falling below expectation. Remember, somebody has a mental age of 4 at the age of 10. Remember, that's going to be far more difficult. It's going to be 40%. That means it is a serious problem. It requires, testing. It requires some sort of assessment. It requires some support. So they are serious underperforming children. And meet expectation is 50%, which is the averages of the world. That we have people who are above, which is above expectation, and then there are excellent performance. That's the bell curve. That's the curve that tells us how the intelligence is placed around the population. Also telling us not everybody is same. Not all can fall into 50%. Not everyone can fall at 100%. And not everyone can fall at 120%. It tells us that there are differences. There are individual differences that we have of intelligence. Also, when we speak about this, remember, we have something which is coming to give us the IQ range. Let's focus on the image which is given below. The IQ range tells us that children who are at the IQ of 190 and 109, the middle section is the average. 80 to 89 are below average, which are their dullers. They need more support. Then we come to 70 to 79. These are borderline children, which is their performance is delayed. Their sensory, some performance is delayed. It could be motor skills. It could be intellectual ability. It's delayed. It's an alarming situation. These are borderline children, needs to be pulled in with a lot of support to at least the low average or average. Then we come to something mild. So we have borderline, then we have mildly impaired, then we have 40, 45, which is moderate. And then after, if we have someone who's below 40, which is 20, 25, is going to be something which is associated to something which is 2025. These are profound and severe. So when we come to below 40, it's going to be profound, it's severe, and then we come to 2025, it's going to be profound. People who cannot be supported in the society, and they need constant attention all the time. And no education can be given. We suggest no families to these people with such less IQ. Then we come to the upper side, above the average. These are 110 to 19, above average people. Then we have superior, 120 to 129, superior kids. Then we have gifted and very advanced, 130 to 44. And now children are having an IQ of 46, 146. They're highly advanced, very gifted in our environment. So this is the IQ range classification. Please have a look. Now, knowing that intelligence can be tested, knowing that intelligence does and has an understanding, and intelligence is something which is assessed, we need to know what is the different kind of assessment that we have of intelligence. Is it assessed like that? We make somebody sit and give some test and it's done. Let's understand the types of tests here. Intelligence have different kind of tests. Let's come to the first. We have individual testing. Individual testing is the one which is administered to one at a time, which is one individual is administered in full supervision. Standardized testing is done to them, and they're alone sitting, and they do it things all alone with all support and guidance. So these are some examples of Stanford Binet scale, Wechsler's intelligence scale, Kaufman scale. These are some scales which are individual testing. Then we have something which is Stanford Binet scale of intelligence. These were the set of intelligence testing which were used with variety of people, which some people were using for adults, some people using for children. So this was given, these set of tests, which is Stanford and Binet test, were given as a range of testing for intelligence in 1905. Started, these are one of the most popular testing. In India, we have revised version of these tests, revised to Indian norms, to Indian concept. Then we have a group test. Group test is the complete opposite to the individual test if we see. So when we speak about something which is group test, remember group test is going to be something which is administered to a group, large number of people. It's not administered to one person at a time. It's more than one people at a time, thus making, so it's quick, saves time, saves energy, saves the amount of money expenditure, cost effective. It's quite cost effective. Why? You can have 20 people sitting together and take the test, which suggests that you have 20 results with you. So saves time, quickness of results, number of results that's coming in, and it's more than one person. Then we talk about individual test. Individual test does have a problem. Individual testing has a problem of costing, time management. We need labor for it. One person per person. So it's very labor intensive, very costly. It's not very cost effective. Whereas in the group test, we find all of these benefits. Labor intensive, cost effective. Gets very cheap when we do 20 people tested on the ground together and we get 20 results. So it makes our process also very quicker. It's quite swift and quite quick. So that completes with group tests. Let's take some example. One of the most famous example that children do in their school, students who have psychology might have done it. It's called Raven Progressive Matrices, which is called the RPM. We have cognitive ability test of Lohmann. We also have multidimensional aptitude testing, which is again done together. We will also discuss Raven Progressive intensively ahead. Now let's come to another kind of bifurcation that we have of testing. This is called the verbal test and the non-verbal test. We'll do the difference also together. That's the reason I've been telling when we talk about the individual and group test, I told the difference also. Kindly look at the text above. What is verbal test? Verbal test is where there is verbality, verbatim given. No. It's something where words are used. It's something where it's not something that you have to hear. No. It's about you need to read, understand. So when we need to use language, what is a major standpoint and difference point of a verbal and non-verbal test? Verbal test will require literacy. It will require people to read well, understand well, being able to comprehend language successfully to perform this test. So people who are not having the capacity to read well, understand well, remember, will not have the capacity to do the verbal test. They cannot do the verbal test. The reason for that is language is not comprehended. Now, one problem with this is, don't you feel this test cannot be given to people who lacks knowledge or who are not good with comprehending information, or also not to give it to illiterates? So we have a major drawback. We cannot give this to illiterates. Illiterates cannot be given this test at all. So this is one of the biggest drawback that we have of the verbal test. The verbal test is it is something which cannot be given to people who are lacking language. Also, the ones who have difficulty in speaking, talking, reading cannot be given. So this is like the biggest drawback that makes you understand that intelligence testing has some norms, has to be common to people to be conducted. So it's not an easy task to conduct test and give it to people. Now let's also come to the fact that verbal intelligence is also kind of intelligence which requires the ability to communicate, solve problems verbally. So approximately most of the test initially, when it was made in 1905 by Alfred Binet and Simon, it was a problem, Stanford, that it was all language-based test. With the passage of time, they understood the difficulty that illiterates were not going to be tested. So they built something which was called a non-verbal test. Non-verbal overcomes this difficulty. So they take care of this disadvantage, which talks about that the verbal test that we talk about, the verbal test is having language. It can only be done by literate. It requires comprehension and verbal intelligence. The ability to comprehend language, the ability to understand language, read well, understand well. Non-verbal takes care of this limitation. How does they do? How do they do that? They make sure that you do not have words and language and no comprehension is allowed. Speech difficulty, people can also go through this. So overcomes all the difficulties and limitation of verbal test. Many of the psychologists have built non-verbal test. Moreover, many verbal standardized testing has been given by Wechsler and Kaufman and RPM. The Raven's progressive matrices, I'll go by the link ahead. Last line, if we focus on one of the example of group test, Raven's progressive matrices given below. That's one of the used and introduced tests to children also in their school and in their graduation, which is Raven's progressive matrices. It's a non-verbal test. It does not have language at all. This is an example of verbal test. Requires knowledge, see, you need to read, you need to understand, you need to comprehend. So it says if, see, look at that, complete the above series 7, 3, 14, 6, 21, 9. What is going to be ahead? Then we have find out the odd of the place, which is 22, 24, 20, 28, 18. That's one. It should have been 26. Then we have A, B, C, D, H, L, J. Find out again the odd. All of these something where you need to read. Then look at the last one that we have, the 30th one, which is mentioned. If Nasir is coded as PCUKT, what is Khan coded as? So you need to code it. So how will, Ragin will be coded. So you can pick up those words from there and do it. So this requires comprehension, understanding, learning. And also at the same time, the verbal ability needs to be great. Now, let's, understand non-verbal test, not only to differentiate, but also see their functionality. We need to know non-verbal test in countries like, I feel in most of the country, non-verbal test is something which is highly required. There are people who do not have a perfect verbal intelligence. There are people who do not have, intelligence in terms of reading well, understanding well. Even if they read well, they do not comprehend well. So we would require a non-verbal test where one's ability to analyze visual information, patterns, pictures, diagram, geometrical figures are assessed rather than something else. So we do not have words and language here, remember. What do we have? We have pictures, we have images, we have patterns, we have figures to be exercising instead of words. So let's take an example. A circle remains a circle for all the region, all the areas, apart cultures also at times. A square remains a square. An arrow will tell you you're going, an arrow, push downward will tell you that you're going down. So it's easy to understand, requires no verbal intelligence. One of the biggest example, most favorable example is given here. I've given some pictures. You need to find the odd one out. Sorry, the missing out here that you need to find out. This is Raven's progressive matrices. This is standard Raven's progressives because it's black and white. Try and identify the first figure. I'll remove the second one. Try and identify the first figure. You have a circle, you have a triangle, you have a square. The second also, you have a circle, you have a triangle, you have a square. The last one has a missing triangle. And you need to know one dotted black is always there. So now a dotted black will not be there in the triangle. So it's going to be D. So see, this is how we function. Does not require verbal intelligence. You don't read anything. You just analyze patterns. Now the last one. You have 3 circles, 2 crosses on circles and 1 complete. Similarly, you have now another shape which is a square, 2 crossed, 1 complete. Now also 1 crossed is left and 1 complete is there. So what is going to be the crossed one? The right answer is going to be 3. So that completes with something that we have as non-verbal testing. We have far more testing, but we feel that, while studying intelligence, you need to understand there are so many testing that has been given. I'll tell you why. Intelligence is the primary ability. It's one of the most primary ability that we have that is used It's a key concept to differentiate people in the world. You realize you greet and meet somebody. What is the first thing that comes to mind? How smart are they? Were they able to? Will they be able to support my group? Should I be taking them in my group? How smart? How smartly they talk? Do they understand what is being said? So the first way to define people is intelligence. The first way to, I feel, differentiate amongst people is intelligence. Individual differences, the key component that differentiate people in our country is intelligence. So testing equally is important of intelligence. So let's take furthermore examples as given above. We will start with culture fair. We will start with performance and culture bias test. Let's start with culture fair and culture bias test. Culture fair is what? Something which is fair to all cultures. You know, it was always stated by psychologists in even 1908 when these tests were being made. They mentioned that culture fair test is one of the most difficult things to be done. Why? Because there is language involved. So culture fair test has biases. Culture fair test is one of the most difficult test to be done because culture bias test has biases of language, of intonation, the way it's processed, understood. So culture fair test usually would be unique of their language, expectations, values, demands, and environmental experiences. A child reared in US will be different in many other aspects with a child which is reared in Indian sub areas. So due to this reason, we make up a test which help them in, assessing a child from different culture, irrespective of their language, their culture, their intonation, their sounds of the words, their values and expectations from the society, from with people and within themselves. Whereas when we talk about, some psychologists mention that we also have tests which are culture biased, which are opposite of culture fair. Culture fair has to be free from all the biases. Else there's no point of having a culture fair test until there are biases of language, intonations, some typical terms which could be jargons to the others. So we need to make sure that we do not have those things. So if you want to make a culture fair test, all the biases needs to be reduced, and that's how a perfect culture fair test is done. Psychologists mentioned ideally, it's very difficult to prepare a culture fair test. It will hold inclination towards something or the other mostly. So that's something which is culture fair and bias. Now we need to know, culture fair test actually frees us from a lot of limitations. Limitation of culture, limitation of language, limitation of difference of race, etc. Similarly, non-verbal test is also very beneficial. It removes the limitation. It removes the limitation of language, people, culture, caste, creed. It can be done by any and everyone. Low strata, high strata, educated, uneducated. I feel the non-verbal test is, I would always say, is one of the most perfect tests when taking it over general people, irrespective knowing their caste, class, creed, education. Now, come to one of the most active tests that we have, like the term suggests, is the performance test of intelligence. Performance test is one of those tests where we tend to, these are standardized in nature, where we have to manipulate some concrete materials without the use of language. In these tests, the items that you required are in response to the motor activity. So you've given a picture, you need to do some motor activity, which is manipulation, fixing. So hands, motor hands, your muscles are being used to make verbal responses are included. So rather than verbal responses of talking to reading, you have image and you need to prepare that image with motor construction of your hands. Like, I'll give you an example. We'll see an example here. For example, a test that involves a maze. So you put your finger and you go through the maze, right? Also through pencil. This is a very beautiful board games. Board games are a perfect example. Remember, performance tests are non-verbal in nature. So remember, it has taken care, it takes care of limitation of language, takes care of limitation of literacy, being literate or being illiterate. It also is something which can be given to most people. But not all non-verbal tests, remember, need not be performance type. Remember, your non-verbal need not be performance, but all your performance tests are non-verbal. Your performance test does not include language at all, but your non-verbals obviously do not include performance, not all of them. So let's understand the concept. Not all non-verbal tests are performance, but all performance tests are non-verbal. So that's a benefit for performance. Let's see one of the most interesting performance tests that we have. This is the pass along test. So you've given those images, you need to pass along the cubes and create it. and there is a stipulated amount of time. See, the most easiest is on the left hand side. You see two blue bricks below and then the right one, and you do not pick the cubes. Gets easy. You need to pass it along without moving the blocks above. So that's called the pass along test that we have. Motor functionality, construction of, which is concrete motor movements, no use of language, no use of words. So that completes with performance test. Now let's come to some interesting tests which are in terms of test which go beyond your normal testing. So this was a draw person test. This ideally also is used in not only understanding intelligence but also understanding personality. So this test was initially developed with Good Enough in 1926. Later it was revised by Good Enough and Harris in 1963. About later, 20, 30 years later, they again made a Good Enough Harris drawing test, which was very popular. These were testing ideally of personality. A lot of people use it for intelligence also. These are called projective tests. Now the term projection is coming why and from where. See, projective means the feelings and thoughts which are projected and comes out. So whatever that is there in your mind, you draw it, you project all your ideas and emotion and you draw it. So that's where, the concept of projective tests are indirect tests. They're not direct. They are not what you write and read. They're what you feel. You're projecting your emotions on a piece of paper. How good, how bad, how depressed, how sad, how defeated that you feel, you draw it out. So this requires a test taker. Only children are test takers here to make 3 pictures on 3 separate papers. They're asked to draw man, women and themselves without any further instructions. You're just given papers and told that you draw your father, you draw a fatherly figure, or you draw a motherly figure, or you draw a woman. If they know, if they're old enough, we tell them you draw a woman, you draw a man, and then you draw yourself also. We do not consider the artistic ability here of children. Children who have artistic ability will be obviously very distinguished, will be able to identify their images far better than the others. They will look better, understand better, etc. Also, we need to know emphasis is given to the child's ability to observe accurately and think conceptually that how does a man look? How does a woman look? So let's take an example. See a student who was 5.5. How do they make it? A child who's 7 years age. See how different that goes. Now a child who's 9.25. You see how from stick figures to a little human to better. And the last one is child who's 10 to 25 years of age. We're not going through the artistic ability. Look at the kind of detailing that they've done. Holding a suitcase, the sleeves, the pants having, holding, which is the seam at the end. The mustaches to a man to identify manly features, which is gender stereotypical features in the man. And also specs going half bald. Similarly, go to a 9.25. They look forward to something that they see around. Boys having short hair, pockets, hands, and feet. Remember, going to 7 years of age, children who do not have artistic ability, are simple with a round face. You do not see, forgot to draw hair, a smiley face, and the last was stick figure. Stick figure is something a very least of ability. This is how they look around the world and understand the world in terms of man and women. So this is interestingly a very beautiful concept and beautiful way to observe children accurately and conceptually. We need trained individuals. It cannot be done by any and everyone. You need to be a psychotherapist, trained in psychometrician of projective testing. You cannot let anyone take this test. It requires good training and supervision. Cannot be done alone. Requires a supervising head. You need to understand it, and because this is a projective test, it has subjective interpretation. There's no number. So no quantitative answers will come in. Like, let's go ahead. Let's go back. In testing like these, verbal test is accurate, has numbers, will give you a number, will tell you where do you fall in the population. Non-verbal test, again, picture test, to tell you the range where you fall. So again, accurate. It is a little objective. Culture fair test and performance tests are also made standardized. But the problem with projective tests are they are standardized, but they're qualitative in nature. They have subjective interpretation, not objective interpretation. Numbers are not there. You don't quantify projections of people, emotions of people, feeling what they draw. That's not quantified. Sometime more. See, let's understand. This is how they've scored also. See above average child, you realize the sketching that the child has done, which is the A time 1. Time 2, look at the score 145, very superior. Why is very superior? Did you see the detailing that the child has done to the hair? And then the above average score is 112. Again, a very sketchy figure that we have. So the time 2 has been better. Let's come to the women that we have. 109 and 102 the last time. See, it's average. It's a women figure. Body is understood, hair is long. We're able to understand the body fat. Now, when we turn to average, average is able to draw well, dress them well, make the difference between the kind of dresses that they hold. Also, the hair pattern is different. And the last that we talk about is very superior. You know, the body form, the stature of physique of a woman is so differently shown. The hair is shown. Also, look at the bangles shown on the hands and the shoes. This is very superior. This is how we accurately do it. Remember, these are also quantitative tests. Also, they are also standardized tests, but they can be subjectively interpreted. The numbers and the scores can differentiate from people to people. That's why people need to be highly trained to be doing this. Now we come to the last kind that we were talking about, and then we'll do some differences and close today's session. Now we talk about the culture bias test. See, culture bias test has a lot of minuses that we talk about. Minuses only in the form of that it cannot be used any and everywhere. So many psychologists have attempted to develop a culture fair test. Remember, as I mentioned before, culture fair test is quite difficult to be made. It can be something where we can make a non-verbal test which can be open to all. But culture fair test, where we can actually look people to expect their expectations, values, ritual, and language. That's quite a difficult thing, where a language can be something which can be common to all. Not possible. So culture fair test were developed under the umbrella of non-verbal tests. Like RPM that we had, we go back again, what was RPM? Raven's progressive matrices, patterns were shown. So a culture fair test was developed on this basis rather than including languages, they used pattern. Common to an area, to a world setup. No, it cannot be. They substituted it to a non-verbal test as mentioned. Also, however, it was realized that the impact of culture cannot be eliminated, and it's thus difficult to prepare a test which can be culturally fair. That's why test making non-verbal was completely something. So eliminated completely from these tests even after making a non-verbal completely. So culture fair, as I mentioned, was one of the most difficult tests which is to be created. Due to this reason, the term comes to be culture fair is used in place of culture free test. We cannot make a culture free test at all. So culture bias test are the ones which are tests which are associated to some kind of culture, some kind of language, some kind of expectation. Like a few tests which was developed in the beginning time, which was developed in Bengali by Lebanese, and it was also we had tested in Urdu. This was all culture bias test because they supported language. They supported language which was Bengali, which was given by Lebanese, and also the kind of intonation, the kind of jargons used in their culture was used. So similarly, culture free test was not possible because the impact of culture cannot. The way we talk, the way we greet people, the way we interact, the way we read a paper and a question also, interact with people is all dependent on culture. So that's why it's called a culture fair test rather than culture free. We cannot make any test which is culture free. Now let's differentiate between the major testing to complete with our session today of what was intelligence, the theories of intelligence and its testing. We started with verbal and non-verbal tests. Remember, let's understand with verbal. Verbal requires literacy. Verbal requires you to read well, understand well and judge well. Now, the non-verbal test is not based on words, but based on pattern, pictures and forms. So that's the first thing. Second, a non-verbal test can be given to illiterates and literates. A verbal test is strictly given to people with verbal intelligence. So people who are verbally appropriate can comprehend things, can understand things, read, analyze, make sense out of it will be given. Now, One of the biases, one of the difficulty of the verbal test was that it cannot be given to the illiterates. It has some sector of people only that it can be given to, whereas the non-verbal test can be given to a wide variety of people. So that's their benefit. So non-verbal holds the benefit and also removes the discrimination, removes the limitation. Now, along with verbal, non-verbal, there's another thing like the term suggests, which is called the performance test. Performance tests are tests where you need to perform, where you need to manipulate, you need to make changes in the thing. So that's called the performance test. Now, can the performance test needed to be read? See, performance tests are done by people. There are instructions which are given by the administrator. So you just need to do what is being told to you. So if we do not remove the administrator and we get the administrator along, remember it can again, this performance test can be done by multiple people. This can be done by illiterates and literates, because here what do we need to do? You just need to manipulate. You just need to manipulate objects, events, make form, figures with motor ability. So yes, it also takes care of limitation like the non-verbal, and we also studied all non-verbal tests cannot be performance. But can all performance tests be non-verbal? Yes, they are. They are. They have all the performance test has that 60% of diversions towards the non-verbal test. So it controls the limitation. It can be given to illiterates, can be given to literates, can be given to people who do not know how to read but know how to fix patterns, make patterns, and do patterns. So this is something which was a benefit. Now going back to the further that we just missed, there were something which was individual and group test. Let's differentiate between this also. Individual test is given to individual, time consuming, labor intensive. You need people to be with the administrator to be with the participant and the subject all throughout the testing is done. And obviously then the results are also shared. Group test given to multiple people. That's like the first thing that we need to know. Saves time, not at all labor intensive. One person can make you conduct 20 testing. Obviously, result sharing is another thing which is done together. Examples as mentioned, Raven's progressive matrices is one, and for individual testing, it's the Kaufman, Stanford, and Binet test or all intelligent test. You individual test. You have one person who will be sticking to you and being with you to right from the administrator, telling you the instruction, taking your doubts in between, where doubts are even taken in the group test, but then they are clarified at a bigger level. So one person doubt can be 15 people doubt also. Now coming to difference of the last kind of test that we have, which is the culture fair and the culture bias test. So culture fair tests are something which is inflicted by culture, but would be something which will try to have features of non-verbal. It can be given to people with multiple culture, can be given to people of wide variety of cultures. So this test can be given to a lot of people with different culture, because it does not hold one specific characteristic of any culture or any being or any society. Whereas culture bias tests are restricted to a culture bias. The first thing that you will find in a culture bias test is going to be the language that you have. The language is going to be something which is going to be towards one culture. So there's going to be a reflection of one culture language. It could be Bengali, it could be Urdu, it could be Tamil, it could be anything that we find. Any kind of language. So that's there. Another thing, culture fair and culture bias tests are equally done in the same pattern. They could be done individually, they could be done group wise. Culture fair test actually takes care of making sure that it controls the limitation. It can be given to many people irrespective of their culture, creed, and caste. Whereas when we talk about the culture bias test, can be given to one kind of culture people. So it's restricted, where culture fair is not restricted. Also to mention and to rewind it again, culture fair tests are difficult to be made because impact of culture is always there. Even if you're giving to multiple people, there are some human errors that you'll always find it. Now, this completes with what is intelligence to conclude with. To help you understand, we have finished the foundation of psychology, telling you that intelligence was paramount for individual differences. We started with approaches of intelligence, which was psychometric in information. Psychometric was G factor as factor of Charles Spearman, seven primary ability of Louis Thurston, and then we have information, which talks about how an intelligent person thinks and acts, which was past model that we've done today. And past model talks about that you start with attention arousal, then you go to processing, then planning is the last thing. Planning tells you do you need to execute something, or probably if not executing something, will you be able to understand that apart the execution, is the plan, the processing accurate for the situation? So if it's not, planning makes changes. Might, if successive is not working, might give you simultaneous. So that was the past model. We'll go to the past model 2 for the revision. One of the most applicatory theory that we have around. So this is the past model. So if planning will tell you to make your decision, if the problems are being solved with successive processing, we go on. If it's not being solved with successive processing, then we actually use the simultaneous. Let's start again. We've done some theories which talks about integral intelligence and technological and non-technological. Technological is something which has advancement of technology, influence of technology. And speaking of something which is non-technological or something, we're more culturally associated, more culturally inclined. We'll look forward to collectivism, we'll look forward to harmony, we'll look forward to social interaction and exchanging roles. And then we had integral intelligence. That's an intelligence within an Indian tradition, which is integral in nature. It has 4 competency, which is social, cognitive, emotional, and entrepreneurial. Then we did the assessment. The bell curve is important to know that there are 90 to 109 are averages. Above that, which is 110 above, becomes superior, high superior, gifted and extremely talented people. Below that comes the low average. We have borderline, we have mild, moderate, severe, and profound, which talks about the graphical representation of numbers of IQ. IQ formula, to revise again, IQ is mental age upon chronological age into 100. So to sum up it all, what is intelligence? Intelligence is stated to be a paramount thing to differentiate people, ability to derive information, learn from experiences, adapt to the environment, understand and correctly utilize your thought and reason. So that finishes with this unit, which is BPC 131. Thank you.